So the Book of Boba Fett is pretty bad, and I want to get into the reasons why. And since I think the primary reason people like this show is the fighting, I want to start by tackling that. So in the Book of Boba Fett, people are consistently allowing Boba to live by using nonsensical weapons. Here, if the assassins had thought about this for a second, they'd say, "Hey, our guy wears armor, so we should use like explosives or Molotovs or any of that." He would have died right there, and he doesn't even have his helmet. So if one of them had brought a gun with them, they probably could have shot him in the face. And beyond that, the melee weapons they choose don't even seem to do significant damage to him. That he's able to take multiple hits and he's not knocked out or incapacitated or any of that stuff. Oh, Black Chrysanthemum, he looks so cool. Oh my god, what a badass. He's a Wookiee, but he's black. Wow. He does, in fact, own a gun. That's interesting. Well, he goes for the choke, and no, there's no knife, there's no gun. He was sleeping. Yeah, just throw him around a little bit, make noise. Yep, throw him into the weapons that he could pick up. Oh, so he has knuckle dusters, but they don't even does the electricity do anything? Here he is getting out meleeed by a man who just woke up from his bath. Uh, yeah, I mean, in fairness here, probably should have killed him, but I mean, if he would have just brought a gun, he would have died. Oh, Boba has backup, but she doesn't have a gun. That guy doesn't have a gun. Oh, there's a gun, but he shoots him in the one place he has armor. Oh, that guy has a hammer? It just doesn't make any sense. Like, there's like 7 people in this room and only one of them has a gun. Oh, there's the Gamorrean guards everyone loves. They don't have guns. They never bothered to teach them how to use guns. That's great. Completely useful to have melee weapons in Star Wars. And for people who are going to say, oh, lightsabers, yeah, there's a difference there, and we all know it. There's the Force and the fact that they can block bullets. If you can't do any of that shit, don't use a melee weapon. Oh, there's a knife in the gun. Okay. So Boba would have died there for sure if he would have actually brought a weapon. Here's a whole group of people not using guns. Black Chrysanthemum has a gun, but it's so big he's barely able to use it. They're like tackling him. Oh, he's brought out the stupid electric brass knuckles. And, oh, this looks like some Game of Thrones crap. He's definitely dead. If any of them have a weapon. Oh no, he lived. Of course he lived. They just cut away. He escaped. Oh, there's a gun. Finally, people are using guns. Of course, they're just ineffective against him, I guess. So then these guys go up against the Gamorrean guards. And of course, they pull out their melee weapons too, because if they had guns, it would show just how stupid the Gamorrean guards are. Looks like they're barely able to move in their costumes. And, you know, they're probably alive knowing Star Wars. Side note, I've been seeing people get hyped up for the return of Mace Windu. Please stop. Like, you can't just keep bringing people back. Death needs to mean something. At this point, it's going to feel like the only people actually dead are Luke, Han, and Leia. So in the finale, things are starting to look good. The good guys are coming out on top, and then the enemy comes at them with these giant droidecas. But when you're watching it, they seem like they're almost unable to fire and hit anything. They're constantly just missing or not shooting. There's a scene where one of the Mod Squad people is saying, "I'll distract it for you, will you shoot?" And then she stands 3 feet away from the person she's trying to help get a shot off. And they still, neither of them get hit. I don't think anyone except the Gamorrean guards died in this whole battle. Boba Fett says, "Oh, I'm going to go get us some help." and he runs back to the palace. And instead of getting Slave 1, which could mow down all of these things against the Rancor, I'm not against having the Rancor fight scene. The way to do it would be to, instead of listening to the scene girl who is saying, oh, we gotta fight out in the street over here and not at the palace, Boba could actually be in charge and lead and say, nah, we're gonna fight him at the palace, and then you could you could find a way for this to happen. You don't have to have him come out here and just fight the robots and in the middle of the street, because the problem here is that I've only seen him shoot at him twice and hit him, and it's crazy. Um, and a little way to get those fun moments of like the Rancor fighting robots and have it make more sense is to make it shorter. Have the Rancor smash these things in 1 or 2 hits, because the longer this fight drags out, the more it becomes apparent that these robots can't hit anything. So the gun train clips I couldn't really find on YouTube, but that one was like mostly okay. It was a little boring and generic, but not super awful like the finale and the rest of the fights. There's also the biker one where they attack the biker in the bar. It's a little bit more defensible because the bikers aren't there to kill Boba, so it makes a little bit more sense for them to have melee weapons. They aren't planning to go to a battle or assassinate someone. Here is the one fight in the whole series that I think is actually good, and it's for a lot of the reasons I just said. So these gangsters may not even know what a Mandalorian is. He came to them, so they didn't plan for this fight. You see them trying to shoot him, but it can be pretty hard. He's spinning around, and he's got all that armor. Even them getting close with the gun could make sense, because you could maybe stick the gun in one of his weak spots, and the aiming won't be such a factor. So this is what I would consider like the baseline of where good starts. So the next thing I want to talk about is the Tuskens. I think basically everything involving the Tuskens is awful. You see people saying this is like character development for Boba, and he learns the value of having a tribe, and this is where he becomes a good person. But basically the second the show starts, he's already good. He's feeling guilty when he goes to swing at the child. They say that this is where the character development really starts for Boba, but really I don't see anything of value happening with his relationship with them. Somehow they got the entire Star Wars fan base convinced that these are the good Tusken Raiders and the other ones are the bad ones. But the very first thing we see them do is find someone who's dying of thirst and then enslave and drag them through the desert. These are not good people. They're they're savages, and they're just as savage as any other group we see. We see them beat Boba, and everyone's just like thinking it's completely normal. But it's hard to blame the fans for this when even the show seems to either forget or try to brush under the rug the fact that the Tuskens did not take Boba in the way he describes it. The other thing that's interesting is they spend a significant amount of time showing the ecosystem of Tatooine, which could be interesting, but they didn't really explain things in a satisfactory way. Apparently the only water on the planet is dug up from the black melons, and they have all these giant creatures all subsisting off of that being the only vegetation. And you could call it a nitpick, but it's really not, because they spend a lot of screen time showing them like digging for their little crickets that they eat and all these different creatures, and they're clearly trying to make it plausible for them to exist in this way, but they're just failing in that fact. And it's weird because in basically every other part of Star Wars or every other movie, we can see that Tatooine is way more than just sand dunes. It could be very easily believable that there's creeks and some vegetation at those creeks. They didn't have to go to it just being, oh, we live in the desert and there's no trees and no water anywhere. That was the decision they decided to go with. And if you wanted to ape dances with wolves and have this whole thing where the Tuskens are just misunderstood victims, the answer is really simple. Instead of starting it off with them just enslaving a man dying of thirst, have them do something kind. Maybe they rescue Boba and the Red Greedo, and then when the Red Greedo wakes up, he just attacks them, assuming that they're vicious monsters because that's what he associates Tuskens with, like everyone else. So the grand payoff of all the time wasted with the Tuskens was Boba apparently learned what it means to be part of like a family, but I felt like that was very little payoff for the amount of time spent on this. Um, they didn't show up to help in the final finale, and by they I mean like another Tusken tribe. There was no payoff that he's become known amongst the Tuskens as someone worth helping. And other than that, what do we get? We see them make their sticks, which is a question that we really didn't need answered. We see them hunt a little bit. We see them enslave people. And they deal with a gun train that they could have just moved away from. If it presumably goes around the same route, maybe don't sit in their path that they go through every time. So the next thing I want to talk about is the crime lord at parts of this show. They're just awful. He meets the other crime lords for one scene at the table, and they're just sitting there like, what do you have to offer me? And he's like, oh, I'll get rid of the Pikes and their spice. And one of the crime bosses says, we're making a lot of money off this spice. And they ignore it. So, of course, he got betrayed in the end when he's going against crime. It turns out the other crime lords are interested in crime. His relationship to the people in the little mini casino is interesting as well. So it seems like everyone is happy to have him there, which is interesting because they're paying him off. So you have to assume he's either extorting them for protection money, saying, hey, I don't want anything bad to happen to this business, so you better pay me. That, or illegal things are going inside that establishment, and he's there to basically act as the pimp and make sure that people pay up and the cops don't get involved, basically. And then, other than that, the only other person who pays him is the water merchant. And the water merchant probably hates him because he just went against him. He's paying them for protection, and Boba's not even holding up his end of the deal. And then, in the finale, he had that whole line where he's like, I have money, but what I'm short on is muscle. Did anyone else notice that he never actually hired anyone to come out and help? He didn't use any of his actual resources. He relied on Gamorrean guards, random villagers, and the mod squad. I'm actually not even totally convinced that the villagers would come out to this, because if one gang came out and told you, hey, we're about to have a gang fight in the middle of the street and we want your help, that would sound crazy to your average person, especially a town this small. I know he shot the sheriff and they'd be angry about that, but if like 6 people get killed in this fight, there's not going to be a town left. So let's take a look at the characters in Book of Boba. So the Sand People are there to be John Wick's dog, I guess, and he'll get upset that they die. They don't really accomplish a whole lot other than that, other than spilling water and breaking the speeders that he gets them. Then there's Boba Fett, who is the crime lord who is against crime, and he wants to be a crime lord because he doesn't want to be put in dangerous situations anymore. But then he's more than willing to put other people in those situations. It's interesting because, like, when they're doing their planning, he says things like, oh, we need foot soldiers. And the only way I could interpret that is we need pawns to go get shot for us, basically. I've already made fun of Black Chrysanthemum, who doesn't often use his guns, and his whole thing is he looks cool. And maybe you could say he owes Boba a life debt, but there's really not a whole lot of deep stuff going on there. Then there's Fennec Shand, and what an unbelievable score for Boba Fett to find this person. She seems to just handle basically all the problems he has. She's both his muscle, his advisor, the one coming up with every good idea, and she's just doing it for free basically. She's more than happy to let Boba just ruin Jabba's crime empire, and she's gonna stay by his side for some unknown reason. She's also there to explain Tatooine to Boba, despite the fact that Boba has ties to Tatooine, and for all we know, she does not. So it's a little weird for that reason. And we get some romance or something here to help explain this. It's kind of interesting that they'd both be huge fans of each other, and they're not even hinting at the idea of that. It's just, oh no, I'm here to be your muscle for nothing, just empty promises. And I think that they missed an opportunity to have a decent romance in Star Wars. Then we have the Power Rangers, and they are just a train wreck from start to finish. There's really nothing good about them. They immediately start back talking Boba, and he just trusts them enough to sleep with them in the building. They could have easily just killed him and became daimyos themselves. But thankfully, Boba never actually has to pay for any of the trusting decisions he makes. Things just tend to work out for him. The Rancor guy that comes with the two Hutts machete, he tells him something, and Boba's like, oh, that doesn't sound true. But he's just going to believe him anyway. He's going to trust these bikers. And the other thing about these bikers is we all know they look stupid. I mean, they don't really belong on Tatooine. The modifications that they get don't seem to really do anything useful. One has an eye that just kind of zooms in, and the other one has a jackhammer foot. They could have found a way to actually give them some useful modifications if that's going to be their whole character. We have an interesting scene in the finale where the red-headed one is talking to one of the villagers, and it's like, oh, you're from the city, well, I'm from the country, and they have to force this whole miniature arc in the middle of the finale because we don't even know who these people are or what they really want. They're just ready to throw their lives down for Boba just because he said you can have a job. They never talk about pay or any of that stuff. The Gamorrean guards that Boba also just trusts for no reason are immediately willing to throw down their lives for Boba, and we never really talk about what it is they want. Is this just the peak of their existence to be a guard with a melee weapon for someone in their little skirts? Something that I noticed in the finale that was interesting is it says speaking Huttese as they fall. So these guys can talk. They could have had some sort of character and said, this is what we're about, this is what we want. But instead, half the time they talked about they're animals. The lady in charge of the canteen is like, oh, do you want your Gamorreans hosed off and fed? It's just really strange that they could have had a little training scene where they show them how to work blasters or gave them some useful weapons and made something of them, but no. So that's pretty much the book of Boba Fett. We have terrible action. The characters are just nonsense, and their only motives is basically to give Boba Fett their all for no real reason. The Tuskens suck, and they were written into a corner basically. There was no reason to make them live just out in the dunes. They could have added some more life to Tatooine. Gave us something to look at, maybe showed a part of the planet that actually looks really pretty. Maybe they find a cave that's amazing or something like that. There's zero growth from what I can tell. Everyone's just as they started basically. And Boba especially, I want to stress that he was a good character or a good guy from the start. He didn't become a good character or good person over the course of this show. The first thing he does is, "Hey, Red Greedo, I'll try to get you out of your bonds and we'll escape together." And the last things that really need to be talked about are the 2 episodes in Army the Book of Boba. I guess they kind of lost faith in their character midway through and they knew it was crap. So the first episode, it kind of gets a pass from me. I think basically most of the stuff that the armorer says is kind of stupid. I think the sword doesn't need to get heavier. I think that was just unnecessary, but ultimately that episode isn't terrible. And then the next episode with Luke Skywalker, really the only problem with it is that the sequels. So Luke Skywalker in the original trilogy was already willing to go against Obi-Wan and Yoda. They said, "Hey, you got to go kill your dad." And he's like, "Oh, this is stupid. I'm not doing that. I don't need to listen to you." He was already carving his own path and not the prequel Jedi that they're trying to make him out to be in this, where he's telling a baby, "You can either hang out with me or you can never see your father surrogate again, or or you can go back to him and then I won't train you anymore." That doesn't seem like the Luke from the OT, but it does seem like Jake Skywalker. So it's hard to tell if the blame should go here or on the sequels for that, because he was already on a path to being a terrible teacher. It's canon. And Ahsoka hanging out with Luke, man, there's a lot there that could be like. I want to hear the conversations they have. Like, I would like just a scene in the Ahsoka show or whatever where they're just sitting by a fire talking, and she explains like the fall of Anakin to Luke, and Luke can say, "Oh, in the end, we did this." We need some like emotional moments that are based on characters we actually like. Well, that's pretty much all. If anyone actually made it to the end of this video, please leave a comment, because I just need to know at least one person actually saw this. Thank you.